The Baltimore Ravens pick up a key divisional victory over the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 14 by the final score of 16-14. We recap the entire game and more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire. We're here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for tuning in, making us your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms, including over on YouTube. So be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Be sure to also follow along anywhere you get your podcasts. So Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. That's PrizePicks.com. Promo code Locked On. It's Victory Monday. Baltimore picks up their second straight win, and this is a big one. 16-14 over the Pittsburgh Steelers in Week 14 in Pittsburgh. In Pittsburgh, the Ravens have a bunch of crazy things happen throughout the game. This was a whirlwind of a contest, but at the end of the day, a win is a win. They go 1-0, improve their record of 9-4 overall. They're 3-0 now in their division. For reference, as I talked about all last week, Baltimore was 1-5 in their division last year. So leaps and bounds better than that. But today we're going to dive into how the offense performed. We'll talk about the defense a little bit in the second segment. We'll dive into the Ravens' upcoming schedule, some key players, some maybe X factors as we move into this final month of the season. We have a ton to talk about. Let's dive into it now. Starting off with the offensive side of the ball, Baltimore only puts up 16 points, but they had to go through some changes throughout the course of this game. The biggest one obviously being, first of all, Lamar Jackson not being active for this one after suffering the knee injury in Week 13 against Denver. So you're already down your star quarterback who makes so many things happen for you. So Tyler Huntley comes in, who, again, very capable backup, the guy that I would want backing up Lamar Jackson if I were the Ravens. He goes in, ends up completing, 8 to 12 passes, 88 yards, not anything too special, but he takes a nasty hit. It was a really nasty, he was trying to pick up a first down. I believe it was on third down. And he got laid into a little bit, and then it looked like his ankle might have been caught up under a defender, but actually luckily his legs weren't in the collision. They ended up getting up out under the defender. But Huntley ends up going to the medical tent, ends up going back to the locker room, and is then ruled out with a concussion. So who's next? They called up Anthony Brown from the practice squad for the game. So that's your guy. Anthony Brown comes in for the Ravens, really in a big spot. This is a hostile environment in Pittsburgh. Ravens-Steelers rivalry. First taste of NFL action for Anthony Brown in a clutch fourth quarter situation where he has to play mistake-free, make things happen for the offense. Now, Brown's stat line was only 3 of 5 for 16 yards, but he made a couple of clutch throws, one on third down. He also didn't make any mistakes. That was the key thing. He was able to play turnover-free football. And he was a good reason why the Ravens were able to pick up this win. But on offense, you got to point to the running game. The running game, smash mouth football, is back in Baltimore. J.K. Dobbins is active for the first time in a couple months here, and he goes off in this game. 15 carries for J.K. Dobbins, 120 yards and a touchdown. We saw the J.K. Dobbins drive on this one, where he on the first play after a 17-yard punt by the Steelers. So Jordan Stout appreciation post. But when you're talking about what J.K. Dobbins did, it was a 2-play drive, 48 yards in only 45 seconds, because J.K. Dobbins rips off a 44-yard run, all the way down to the Pittsburgh 4-yard line, and then he punches it in from 4 yards on the next play. And Dobbins, he did look a little gimpy on that run, he's still getting healthier, as he talked about after the game. So if we had seen a fully healthy J.K. Dobbins burst through that hole and really be one-on-one with Nick Fitzpatrick like that, it looked like he was going to outrun him. But again, Dobbins is still working his way back. But for now, he did what he could to help will this Ravens team to a victory. For him coming back, this being his first action in a couple months, looked pretty good. I mean, again, not 100%. You could see that he was working hard to pick up those yards and everything, but as he talked about, he will get healthier. But it wasn't just J.K. Dobbins on the ground for the Ravens. Gus Edwards, 13-66 or 13-for-66 on the ground. So Dobbins averages 8 yards a carry. Gus Edwards averages 5.1 yards per carry. You have Tyler Huntley 9-for-31. That's 3.4. So the Ravens as a team rushed the football 42 times in this game for 215 yards. That's, again, 5.1 yards per carry as a team. This was Ravens football. This is what so many people have been wanting to see for so long, myself included. Run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. The Ravens have the personnel to do this. And even down Kevin Zeitler, you had Ben Cleveland stepping in, Tristan Colon stepping in at right guard as well. The offensive line played really, really well in this game. Ben Powers played well. Ronnie Stanley comes back and looks like Ronnie Stanley. People were contributing up and down that offensive line from left to right. I've always said it. Everything starts up front for an offense. Everything. The offensive line is the key because, again, it doesn't matter how good your quarterback is, how good your running backs are, your wide receivers, your tight ends. If you cannot block up front, if you cannot get to the second level and seal off defenders and open up holes and whatnot, guys are going to be in the offensive backfield. Defenders, blitzers are going to be in the offensive backfield within half a second or 1 second or whatnot. So big shout out, big credit to the Ravens offensive line there. And also, you look at some of the receiving. Now, the Ravens only did throw 17 passes in this game, so it's not like they were airing the ball out. This was a ground and pound, run the ball slugfest against the Steelers defense, by the way. It was a top 10 unit in defending the run this year heading into this game. And they could do nothing. They could not stop the Ravens on the ground. This was that dominant performance that we were looking for. Not necessarily wire-to-wire victory, domination in all levels, but on the ground, the Ravens dominated. And depending on the status of Lamar Jackson, depending on the status of Tyler Huntley, the Ravens might have to go back to that. And I would not be mad at that whatsoever. So I think for the Ravens, I hope maybe this was the awakening for the Ravens offense, where they can say to themselves, we just beat a top 10 rush defense by running the ball over and over and over and over again. If they can do that against the Steelers, they can do that against a lot of teams, especially with Dobbins and with Edwards and with the offensive line. Lamar Jackson coming back in the fold and what he can do with his arm and with his legs. I think maybe this was the awakening the Ravens needed on the offensive side of the ball, and hopefully they can continue the momentum. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Baltimore does have a few things that they can improve upon. Demarcus Robinson had a pretty good game overall. He was the Ravens' leading receiver, 5-for-52. Deshaun Jackson, 2-for-34, had a 25-yard catch. Deshaun Jackson has been an impact player for the Ravens in very limited spurts. I know that the signing was very highly criticized, and he's not a number one. He's a veteran. You're not getting this star-stud guy in Deshaun Jackson, but he has made an impact for them throughout the course of this season. So shout out to him. Even if it is only 1 or 2 plays a game, he has made that impact for him. So that's the Deshaun Jackson mini rant, I guess. But again, the stuff I mentioned, the Ravens have to clean up on. Again, third down was not a good day for the Ravens on third down again. 3 of 13 for the team in week 13 against Denver. 4 of 13 for the Ravens in week 14 against the Steelers. So they have to be better on third down. Just extend those drives out. The Ravens to end the game, well, we would think to end the game, but there ended up being a little more drama that happened. Late in this game, the Ravens had a 13-play, 57-yard drive that lasted just under 8 minutes. Those are the kinds of drives that I think people want to see the Ravens put together much more consistently. Those 13 play, the end of the game against Denver, 16 plays. If they can put together those 10-plus play drives, they're going to be in good shape. Red zone offense, again, was an issue for Baltimore. They go 1 of 3 in the red zone. And I know a lot of it was overshadowed by, they have Justin Tucker making the field goal deep in Pittsburgh territory, which ended up actually making him the Ravens all-time points leader, all-time score leader. So congrats to Justin Tucker, obviously, for being the Ravens all-time scoring leader here. And no one deserves it more than Justin Tucker and what he's been able to do. So 2 greats there. You have Justin Tucker, number 1 now, and Matt Stover now there at number 2. And then later in the game, you were thinking, all right, the Ravens all they need is a field goal. So on that 13-play drive, they don't punch it into the end zone. They kick the Justin Tucker field goal to end up going up 2 possessions. So you're thinking, all right, fine. They can settle for a field goal there as long as they're getting points, but you want to see them punch the ball into the end zone. In the red zone, they've not been good at it this year. They have to be better, especially down the stretch there. But that does not overshadow the fact that J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, this Ravens run game, Anthony Brown, the Ravens offensive line, the Marcus Robinson. There were a lot of contributors to step up on offense for the Ravens. So while the end score does not look like it was necessarily an impressive offensive performance, just 16 points for the Ravens, their ground game dominated. And again, I'll say it again. I hope this is the awakening the Ravens offense needs to step up and start to stack performances where they can rush for 200 yards a game and maybe put up more points next time, maybe in week 15 against Cleveland, which is their next contest. Coming up here, though, on Locked On Ravens, we'll be diving into the defensive performance for the Ravens, talking about everything that happened in that week 14 game. So be sure to stay tuned. So a ton to dive into on the show. But first, this episode is sponsored by Turo. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. Where Turo, you can book any car you want wherever you want it from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the U.S., U.K., Canada, and even Australia. You can book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family road trip. Got a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or a holiday. You can also find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just want to get from point A to point B. You can test drive that new electric car you've been having your eye on to see how it fits your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms, conditions, and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and find your drive at Turo.com. And this episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is releasing a slate of new football podcasts that we're sure you're going to love. That's why you'll be able to find a sneak peek of Think Like a Champion available right now as a bonus episode on Locked On Presents. Think Like a Champion is a brand new podcast from Russell Wilson and Audible. Russ is a champion on the field, but off of it, we rarely know the grind on the path to greatness. Russell Wilson, alongside co-host Harry Wilson and the late Trevor Maurer, digs into how high-performance athletes, artists, and leaders push the boundaries of their potential. Here, two-time Super Bowl champion and MVP Von Miller to deliver sharp insights about performing at your highest levels in moments of extreme pressure. Or NCAA champion Tim Tebow discuss how to find your unique personal mission in the world. Head over to Locked On Presents for a sneak peek of Think Like a Champion, or catch the full series available anywhere you get your podcasts. Available everywhere now. Audible, get in the game. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens here on Victory Monday. Kevin Ostreicher still here with you. Again, Baltimore defeating the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 14, 16-14. So the Ravens pick up another grinded out victory. And those Pittsburgh-Baltimore games, always really good, always hard fought. This was an example of that. Let's talk about Baltimore's defense now, holding Pittsburgh to just 14 points. Now, for the Ravens and everything they went through with their quarterback situation, Pittsburgh also had to make some changes throughout the game at the quarterback position. Very early on for them is Kenny Pickett on the first possession of the game. Patrick Queen shoots up the middle. We'll talk about Patrick Queen and obviously Roquan Smith in a couple minutes here. But Patrick Queen shoots up the middle, can't quite get Kenny Pickett down on the ground. Roquan Smith comes in and cleans him up. He kind of slams him a little bit to the ground, not like malicious or anything. Obviously, we're trying to get him to the ground. But Pickett, you can see his head kind of slam against the turf. Pickett comes out, is evaluated for a concussion, actually passes the protocols, and then comes back in the game for the next possession. Now, after that possession, he ended up being ruled out for the game with a concussion. So in comes Mitch Trubisky, who I know for those familiar with Mitch Trubisky, the fall from grace that he has had over the course of the last couple of seasons, he got benched for Kenny Pickett, wasn't really performing during his time even as a starter in Pittsburgh earlier in the season. And Baltimore made him pay for a lot of throws that he made throughout the course of this game. The Ravens intercept him 3 times. Queen and Smith getting their hands both on footballs in the first half. Man, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen were like Shaq and Kobe out there, the prime Shaq and Kobe on the Lakers. They were just tearing it up on the field in the first half. They both had amazing games. First, there was Roquan Smith picking off Mr. Trubisky. It all happened also deep in Baltimore territory when the Steelers were driving. That's the key part of this. Roquan Smith intercepts Trubisky deep in Baltimore territory. Then at the end of the first half, Pittsburgh is driving again, and you're thinking, all right, well, it's going to be at least a field goal. Maybe they score a touchdown. Just try and limit them as much as you can. And Patrick Queen ends up leaping for a ball. I don't think Trubisky saw either player. I don't think he saw Smith. I don't think he saw Queen either. But Queen ends up leaping for this ball, and he ends up bringing it down. He said that he thinks it's the best interception of his career. It is an impressive catch. He goes up for the football and brings it in. And then the third interception for Trubisky was on a deep shot. It was overthrown. Marcus Williams back in the lineup and doing Marcus Williams things, intercepting another pass. He has been an interception magnet this season, and exactly why Baltimore signed him. And look, 5 years, $70 million for Marcus Williams. It's a steal. 100% a steal. He's a young safety. He is a good safety. He is exactly what the Ravens needed on the back end, is that ball hawk guy who can roam all around the field. You can put him in single high if you need to. He can control the back end. He is the player that makes an impact. The Ravens got back multiple high impact players on Sunday against Pittsburgh, in Dobbins, in Stanley, in Williams, all these guys coming back. It was great for them to have Marcus Williams back on the field for them. Now, in terms of actual stats for the Steelers and their offense going up against this Baltimore defense, the Ravens hold the Steelers offense to 4 of 8 on third down. So it's not like the Steelers were attempting a ton of third downs anyway. I mean, Baltimore did win the time possession battle by about 4 or 5 minutes-ish here and there. Pittsburgh only had 2 penalties called against them, though, throughout the entire course of the game. Pittsburgh actually averaged more yards per play than the Ravens, obviously more yards per pass than Baltimore, but the Baltimore defense, again, just stifled a run game. They stifled the Pittsburgh run game this week, 3.3 yards per carry allowed to Pittsburgh on Sunday. Najee Harris led the Steelers, 12 carries for 33 yards, and the score for him, but that's only 2.8 yards per carry. Kenny Pickett had 2 for 16 on back-to-back plays, who was able to escape the pocket run for a couple of nice long gains. Jaylen Warren, 3 for 11. Benny Snell, 2 for 4. And then Steven Sims, 1 for 1. So Pittsburgh could not get anything going on the ground. And then through the air was Trubisky, who finished 22 of 30 for 276, 1 touchdown, and those 3 interceptions. So, I mean, look, a huge shout out to Patrick Queen, a huge shout out to Roquan Smith. Those 2 guys absolutely played incredible football for the Ravens on Sunday. We can also kind of throw special teams in here a little bit too, because the Ravens end up blocking a field goal in a 2-point win. That was the difference in the game here. And it was Calais Campbell who ends up getting his hand on it. Big Calais Campbell. So Calais Campbell appreciation as well. He is somebody who just, he's in the right place at the right time, it feels like, a lot of the time. He has that veteran savvy to him. And Campbell kind of talked a little bit about what went into that blocked field goal after the game and said that Chris Horton actually called an audible that moved him over to the A gap. And then, the rest is history. Campbell gets his hand on the football. And again, that was one of the main differences in how the Ravens were able to pull off this victory. So big shout out to Calais Campbell, and that, just many special teams aside there from me. But Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, Chuck Clark, Roquan Smith, and Patrick Queen were tied for the team leading tackles with 6 apiece. Marlon Humphrey did not have a wonderful game in this one. This was probably his worst game of the season. He was matched up with George Pickens a little bit, got mossed a couple times there. George Pickens made a couple of phenomenal. George Pickens is going to be a player. I loved him coming out of college. Thought the Ravens should have picked him. It was tough between him and Ajabo. We'll see what Ajabo is. Right now, I still probably lean Ajabo, but we haven't seen Ajabo play. So maybe we're having a conversation in 3 years where it's, the Ravens made the right pick in David Ajabo, or the Ravens made the wrong selection by not taking George Pickens. So we'll see how it ends up. But Pickens is going to be really good. You can just tell by what he's done so far right now. But Humphrey, not a great game from him. He admitted it. So, he took accountability, which was really cool to see after the game on social media. Kyle Hamilton, all these guys, Chuck Clark as well. They all made impact plays. Marcus Peters, he was in the area. Deontay Johnson pushed off of him early in the game and then was actually called for it later. I think he was called for it on Humphrey. So that's something that just is there. But sack-wise, the Ravens end up sacking Trubisky just once. It wasn't a high sack game for either. Only 2 total sacks in the game, and it was that Roquan Smith play I was talking about earlier there. No, excuse me. They sacked him twice. The Ravens sacked Kenny Pickett once and then missed Trubisky once. So Tyus Bowser had a sack on Trubisky. So that's what that was. 1 sack from Tyus Bowser, 1 sack from Roquan Smith. So look, Baltimore's defense has been on a tear lately. This wasn't a perfect all-around game. The ball was moved up and down a little bit on them. But even so, Baltimore was able to stop the Steelers when they needed to. They didn't give up 28 points or 35 points because Baltimore was intercepting passes, blocking field goals. And that's what counts at the end of the day is, did you score more points than your opponent? Did your defense hold the opponent to less points than your offense? And the Ravens defense did. And so they can clean up some stuff. There is still some stuff they can get better at for sure. Chunk plays. They also missed a ton of tackles in this game. This was probably one of their worst, if not their worst, tackling performance of the season. So that's stuff they have to work on heading into week 15. But that's the next part here. What can they do over this final month of the season? Is there are now just 4 games to go moving forward. So coming up, we'll be diving into that and more. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about on Locked On Ravens. But first, I do want to tell you a bit about PrizePicks. And I keep winning in fantasy. I'm excited about it. I didn't win in every league I'm in, but I'm excited heading into these fantasy football playoffs. But if you want a different twist on fantasy, be sure to try out PrizePicks. PrizePicks is super easy to use. They have a ton of entries you can use, and how it works is you pick 2 to 5 players, and if they go score more or less in their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times the money on your entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projection on any sport that you watch, including the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, college basketball, and more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have saving fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. You deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at center for an instant deposit match of up to $100. We're back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Rounding out the show, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you after Baltimore defeats Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh 16-14. And this win moves Baltimore's record to 9-4 in the division. They are now 3-0. And right now, the division looks like Baltimore and Cincinnati both still at the top of the division as Cincinnati beat Cleveland in week 14. So those 2 teams are both 9-4. Then you have Pittsburgh and Cleveland. They're both at 5-8. So 2 teams atop the division for first, 2 teams in third. So this is all but a 2-team race right now. It's between Baltimore and Cincinnati. But at the moment, Baltimore has a couple of advantages over Cincinnati. For one, the divisional record is key here. Baltimore 3-0 in their division, as I talked about, but Cincinnati's 2-3. So the Ravens, if they lose that game to Cincinnati in week 18, and it feels like that's what it's going to come down to, that week 18 matchup in Cincinnati. If they lose that matchup, the head-to-head tiebreaker would be 1-1. So that kind of goes out the window. But divisional record, that's a huge deal when it comes to who can win this division. So you're looking to host a home playoff game, and for the Ravens, they have to take care of business and first win that division. And there's a chance they could win out here, but they have a couple of really tough games that they have to go through now. Cleveland is a team that I think Baltimore can beat. I think it's going to be a really close game. I think they can win that. Cincinnati is the one in week 18 I'm looking out for, but in between, you have Atlanta, and you also have Pittsburgh again. So the schedule for the Ravens is Cleveland, then Cleveland, then Atlanta, then Pittsburgh, and then Cincinnati. So I think that all on paper, that's a pretty decently easy schedule, but we have talked about the on-paper thing before where any given Sunday, any team can beat you. The Ravens have played great defense, exceptional defense for the most part over the course of their last 4 games here coming out of the bye week. But it's about the offense. If the offense can get clicking, if the offense can run the ball the way they did against the Steelers in week 14 for the rest of the season, heading into the playoffs, if the pass game can have some semblance, if the third down offense can get better, if the red zone offense, if they can score in the red zone, if they can go 2 or 3 in the red zone, if they can go 3 or 4 in the red zone, just not these 1 for 3, 2 for 4, 1 for 4 games. That's just leaving too many points on the board. If you can't, I'm not expecting them to score on every red zone possession. That's unrealistic and it's not happening, right? But I think the Ravens offense has enough talent on it that, you're able. The Ravens red zone offense has struggled for multiple reasons. It's not just play calling. It's not just execution. It's both. It's both play calling and execution. I mean, you miss a wide open Mark Andrews streaking over the course of the field. That's a wide open touchdown the Ravens missed on Sunday, and it wasn't play calling on that play because Mark Andrews was open on that possession. So sometimes it does go down to play calling, and sometimes guys get open in spite of a bad play call. But sometimes a good play call is ruined by bad execution. We have seen both of those things happen over the course of the season so far for Baltimore. They just have to clean it up a little bit on third down and in the red zone. But if they can continue, we saw a lot. In Kaji Ismail and I talked about this on Friday. Hugh made a great point where in the run game, it's not necessarily how effectively you're running the ball. It doesn't necessarily come down to yards per carry or touchdowns or yards or whatever. Sometimes it comes down to how effectively you run on early downs. And against Pittsburgh on Sunday, we saw them running the ball effectively on first down, picking up 5 yards, 6 yards, 7 yards. That's something I really liked to see. And so with the way the defense is playing right now, it doesn't look like they're slowing down anytime soon. If the offense can catch up to them or even just be a little better than what they have been, they can start winning these games convincingly, and they can start building and stacking momentum. So we'll see what ends up happening. Cleveland was a game that was obviously flexed from Sunday to Saturday, so it's moved up a day for the Ravens, and we will see who the quarterback is. Lamar Jackson doesn't seem like he's going to play. John Harbaugh is talking about the quarterback situation after Huntley got injured after the game and did not mention Lamar Jackson's name in there, so maybe it was just an oversight. Maybe he didn't realize what he was saying or whatnot, but I know the reports coming out on Sunday morning where the Jackson might miss what were the next 2 games. So Pittsburgh and Cleveland, he comes back against Atlanta. So then that leaves you Tyler Huntley. But where's Tyler Huntley in the equation? And John Harbaugh talked about, he can't necessarily weigh in on it because he's not a doctor, obviously, as I am also not a doctor. But he said that talking to Tyler Huntley, things looked good or seemed good at least, and that he was reciting the months of the year backwards and asked the reporter if he could do it. Let's see if I can do it. Ready? December, November, October, September, August, July, June, May, April, March, February, January. Boom. All right. So I did it. So I don't know. I think if you're concussed though, it might be a little more difficult to do it than that, but I am proud to say that I could do that off the top of my head. And so no rehearsal from me. That was right off the rip. But so I do hope Tyler Huntley's okay enough to play in this game against Cleveland. I hope Lamar Jackson's okay to play enough. But if it does come down to Anthony Brown, I would expect a very run-heavy script like we saw in this one. But you can't just run the ball 60 times a game and throw it once or throw it no times and win. You have to be able to do both effectively. And so for Brown, he'd have a week to prepare if Huntley misses practice and whatnot. But hopefully Jackson can play. If not Jackson, hopefully it's Huntley. And if not Huntley, and the next guy up, it is Anthony Brown. So Baltimore picks up that 16-14 win over the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 14, and they move that record again to 9-4 and stay atop of the AFC North division. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens content, so be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.